Hello, hello. My mission is simple, to help you protect your family and keep more of your money. I'm here to help level the playing field for families and those who seek the truth. There's always a new way to make money, but at the end of the day, it's your family's security and your legacy that matter. And I promise to help you protect what's really important to you. Legacy Money starts now. Hey guys, how are you? Barry Page with Legacy Money, and try to get, I think we have a little sharing of the screen. Let's get back to this. All right, welcome to Legacy Money, the show that helps you live more, give more, and leave more. Today, I'm excited. We have a special guest with us, Marc Tomei. Marc has over 20 years experience in financial services, and he's a Navy veteran and a colleague and friend of mine. He hails from the great state of Michigan. Marc, welcome to the program. How are you today? You might be on mute.
Hey, Barry, it's great to be here with you.
Awesome.
The great state of Michigan is on fire today, so it's nice to be inside and great to be talking with you.
I hear you. It's hot here in Mississippi as well. So, yeah, Marc, I know we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah.
We don't get to see each other as often as we used to, but today we're going to talk about retirement and estate planning. And, you know, I think as we get older, I know for me, I got my Social Security tab. I'm eligible to take my benefits now if I wanted. So as we get older, you know, these things become more prevalent. So I know you have a lot of experience in that. And I recently received an email kind of by accident. I'm on your email list, but it was the family treasure map. And, you know, that's, you told a story. So I'm going to let you tell the story. But it really just kind of reminded me that we need to be discussing these things, you know, with our clients, with the people we love and care about more often. So tell us a little bit about why you put that together and, you know, tell us about that.
Well, it's funny you brought up age because age is a factor. You know, I think when we're younger, we go through traumatic family loss, we go through deaths, but we're not always in the position to see it from the lens of those who have to pick up the pieces financially, and in dealing with all of the legal and the tax and the financial ramifications that goes with death. So experiencing that at that age is a new experience for a lot of people. And I've had the experience of working with clients through those scenarios. I've had it in my personal life. And usually, if that happened and I saw folks struggling through that process, I usually assumed it was because they didn't have a good estate plan in place, or they didn't have an estate planning partner or attorney, or it just hadn't been something that they had dealt with. But I had a couple opportunities to watch families who absolutely had estate plans in place and had partnerships with attorneys. But what we found was that not everybody that has even the written estate plan in place is really prepared at the moment when it arrives. And the reason for that is because you know, there are those out there that have no estate plan and have put forth no planning for that eventuality. And if that is you, then I encourage you listening to change that today. But even beyond that, those who have put estate plans together, we don't always want to assume that because the binder exists that you know what to do. And what I mean when I say that is because typically when you go and you meet with an attorney and you pay for an estate plan, the completed deliverable is normally a 3-ring binder, and it has all kinds of legal language in it, and may not always be the most useful tool when it comes into the time of need. And then what I further found is that even though you may have an estate plan, that does not mean that the estate plan is what we call funded, meaning you might have the structure that is in place, but your underlying asset accounts and beneficiary designations were never updated to reflect the trust. So even though you may have the trust exist, you may not have your assets actually titled to the trust. That's a separate step that is kind of known in the industry as funding the trust. And I've learned not to assume that just because someone has a trust, that the trust is properly funded. So really what I did was I built something that I wanted to be a useful tool for a family to be able to communicate their wishes and have it be something that is usable. So when you let me know that you can see that, I'll start talking through it. But
yeah,
yeah,
I want you to share that with us, the graphic, and I want to back up, just a little bit, because for those of y'all that just might be joining us, we want you to participate in this. So if you've got questions, put them in the chat. We've got Logan on board with us to help us with that. Logan, if you want to say hello. But he'll be taking your questions, and we'll try to get back to them if you have any questions. And I just want to start out with a little disclaimer. We're not attorneys. We're not accountants. We're advisors. We work with people. I have both of us for over 20 years. And the estate planning is typically one of the first things that I try to talk to people about. Before we get into anything else, everybody wants to talk about the money, but it's like pulling teeth sometimes. And so, Marc, when I saw this treasure map and I heard his story about his parents, and that's what I want you to kind of share with us, Marc, how it's affected you. And my mother turns 90 this month. And when I was younger, or when I first got in this business, especially, I would ask her, have you done this stuff? And she would say stuff like, well, I don't have any money, so what difference does it make, right? But she's feeling that today because my dad and my stepdad have passed, and she's basically living on her own. And we've got some longevity in our family. My aunt and uncle lived to be 96, 98. My great grandmother to 106. So what good's it gonna do for us to live that long if we don't have any money, if we don't have a plan? And so that's what I want you to kind of get into. But we're going to cover these critical issues and tie it all into retirement and your plan and how you can avoid some of these pitfalls: taxes, uncertainty, family disputes. And we'll share that with you. And you may need an attorney. You may need an accountant. You may need wills or trust. That'll be up to you. But there are some simple ways to go about these things. And we do recommend that you have somebody locally if possible. But nowadays you can do a lot of this stuff on your own. You can do it online. But you do need to have something, especially if you have minor children. Very important to have that. So didn't mean to interrupt there. But yeah, I do want you to share your screen if you want to share that that treasure map, that family treasure map, and just talk a little more to that. That would be awesome, Marc.
Absolutely. And it goes along the lines of beginning with the end in mind, right? So when people hit the stage where they're ready to start taking their money seriously, and that hits everybody at different phases of life for different reasons. Maybe it's the first time you're married or the birth of your first child. Maybe that's the impetus to really get serious about planning. For some, it might just be creeping up on retirement and facing the prospects of leaving the workforce. And maybe that's their first foray into taking money seriously. So it's not always about retirement planning, but like any good plan, you always want to start with the end in mind. And the unfortunate reality is we get no choice over the end date. And that's a complicating factor in financial planning. So part of having a solid financial plan is being ready to die today. And I've heard it said, you're never really ready to fully live until you're prepared to die. And that, that may hit different people differently emotionally, but it made a lot of sense to me, because having the end in mind and having things taken care of creates that feeling. It's hard to put a price tag on that feeling. But when you asked about my parents, there's a whole day worth of stories to tell in that environment. And my parents were married for a very long time, 40 years plus, and loved each other dearly. And they prepared for retirement. Unfortunately, retirement was not in my dad's cards. He passed away shortly after turning 61. So in all of that time, it was generally my dad that was in charge of doing the bills, and he was the one that knew where all the accounts were, and my mom handled her side of the house and all that went along with that. Well, when my dad passed, it was a challenge to understand for my mom, where is everything? Who am I supposed to call? What do I do next? And she didn't have a family treasure map for sure. So that was one of those thought starters for me, because I had to help her through that. And I watched what she went through firsthand. You'll hear about it in working with clients, and you'll deal with it at some level. But when you're driving over to mom's house to physically look for, where are the bank account records? Where is the insurance? Who is the attorney, and which one do I call? Where is this will that I know we have? Just those types of everyday problems. And I promise you, when your spouse passes away, that is the last thing you want to be worrying about and focusing on and dealing with. So there's a lot of reality that comes into play. We cleanse things when we think through them, right? It's like, you watch somebody get shot on TV so many times, you never really appreciate what it would actually mean to be shot. Same thing, when you're talking about estate planning, we hear about wills and trusts and the death of a client or the death of a friend, but until it hits home, until you have to actually navigate your way through that, it doesn't hit home enough, in my opinion. So again, the tool was built from a place of love. And how can I help families better coordinate, better plan, better communicate, and just experience better outcomes through the inevitable tough times that we all have to face when we lose a loved one. So I'll just walk through the treasure map. Can you see it on your screen? And I'll walk through it real quick. Barry, can you see it?
Yes, we see it fine.
All right, perfect. So I'll just run it through it quickly. And if anybody wants a copy, reach out for sure, and we'll make sure you get one.
Yeah, we'll put all this in the show notes, and you can get a copy of this just by asking.
Yeah, it comes from a place of love. You're doing this for your family because you love them, and you don't want to create problems for them. And money is an important part of every family. So I gave space here to tell a little bit maybe about family history. I think it's more than just dollars and cents when we talk about estate planning and generational planning. So what is the family history? What did mom and dad have to do to get the money that we're even here talking about? What did grandma and grandpa do to help mom and dad or to hurt mom and dad? The history is just a good place to capture those thoughts when you have time to sit quietly and think through them. And I think this is a very valuable, underused tool that families could get a lot from. So the family love letter is just capturing critical lessons learned. So what do I want my family to learn from my experience? If I'm the one that passes, What do I want them to know about what I think is important in life? What's the most important thing I've done in my life? If I leave an inheritance, what would I want you to accomplish from that? Right? Do I want you to just speed off in a fancy new car, or what wishes do I have? How would I like to be remembered? So this is just a little spot for a love letter to your family and to communicate some of those. And then we get into the nitty gritty, the important information, the personal details that you'll need. If your spouse or somebody that you love passes away and you're trying to help them through this, it's good to know, what other personal details. If they have an employer, who's a contact there, who are their advisors? Who did they work with? It's very uncommon for a child to know who their parents' CPA is or who the estate planning attorney is. If they had benefits at the workplace, what is the value of that, and who should they contact? If they had business ownership interests, and then just capturing assets. And I apologize for the view. This is built as a foldable document, but assets, where are they? Who's the custodian? Who's the owner? What's the approximate value? An account number. Who is the beneficiary? Who should I contact? If there's veteran benefits, if we have liabilities that the estate will face, any estate work that is done can be summarized here. Insurance coverages. Insurance coverages are always one of the very first thoughts that go through the mind of beneficiaries of loved ones that are surviving the deceased. So capturing, where is the insurance? Who do I contact? What's the policy detail? Any personal property. This is kind of, you never want to laugh. We make jokes about it, but I have seen families literally tear themselves apart over a lampshade, or over grandma's earrings, or over a bowling ball. Right. So
absolutely. It's funny you say that, because I brought up my mom a little earlier, and in reality, she was raised on a farm, and my grandparents had 300 acres. They had 3 children. They left them each 100 acres. So she inherited, quite a bit of land. Do we have any of that today? I mean, things like that aren't important, but to play on what you were saying, I saw my mother and my aunt, who was very prim and proper, fighting like cats and dogs over little bitty pieces of furnishing in the house, right? Little bitty things. And so, yeah, it happens. And that's why you need to write it down, right? I mean,
I'll tell you, in the realities of life, it's one of the most important sections. Like I said, it's not all about dollars and cents. Real life matters. And having your wishes clear is of the utmost importance. And so safekeeping, if they have a safety deposit box, who can get in it? Where is it? Where's the key? Nowadays, passwords, online passwords. If you don't have your spouse or whoever passed away, if you don't have their passwords, you're in a lot of trouble. You can't get into their bank account. You can't get into the things that you're going to need when the time comes. So just any other wishes in the event of my death? Are we going to do a cremation? Are we doing a funeral? Who do I want? What do I want my obituary to say? You can have input into all of that, and it can be done and planned ahead of time. And as much of this, the more you map out for your family, I promise the more they will appreciate the effort that you put into it. And like I said, I think many times it goes even beyond just going to the attorney and getting the will and the estate, I think. So it was important to me to have a tool that could be a value add for my clients and my people. So
that's great. And, to us who do this on a daily basis, sometimes we just kind of take these things for granted. And because everybody, again, seems to be caught up in what's happening now in the news and money, we forget the little things. And these things are important. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. And just kind of shifting gears now to retirement.
Sure.
And how the retirement plan and the estate plan work together. If you don't mind just kind of going over, when you speak to someone for the first time, and you and I were brought up using the same planning software, but again, it typically starts with us with protection of the estate, protection of the assets, protection of the life and the income. But most of our clients are getting older, as we are. So they're nearing that retirement time, and it's beating on the door. So I know there's some real risk that, the markets are at all-time highs, and we haven't had a so-called, crash meltdown in a while.
Sure.
But it's out there. It could happen any day. And if you just look at where things are invested. So why don't you kind of share a little bit about retirement and some of those risks that we may be able to avoid as we kind of shift into that next phase of life?
Sure. And it's a phase shift of life that brings a lot of changes, many of which I think the folks that are arriving there right now are arriving woefully unprepared for. And there's a lot of reasons for that. So when you say we want to start with the end in mind, with the estate plan, it's the same thing with money and planning. We're out there during our working years trading our time and our talent for dollars, precious dollars. And our challenge is understanding what to do with each and every dollar that we make, because they're precious. And we've got to make those dollars do as many jobs and as much work as we can get them to do. And unfortunately, there is a big, sophisticated, complicated financial system out there that your money is at war with. And the system is constantly confiscating your money. And that's a big part of what I talk to every client about is, your money is at war with the financial system, and the system has been designed by very sophisticated people, and the system profits from confiscating your money. So defense, protection is always top of mind when we talk about this, right? Because if you look at it from the basics, when we first start out, maybe we were just getting out of high school or just getting out of college, we don't have a lot of wealth, right? Well, wealth is far from mind, but what we have is earning power. So we go to work and we start earning, but we don't have net worth necessarily. So how do we coordinate protecting what we want and what our maximum potential is? And so we make decisions about where to put resources every day, and where we put resources matters. It determines what rules you play by, what taxes you face, what fees you face. And there's a lot of complexity to all of that. And I think, unfortunately, we tend to silo those decisions and we silo those discussions, right? So I think in a lot of cases, retirement planning, or when we talk about this stuff, it generally is just lumped into a portfolio or an investment, right? Or IRA or a 401k or your mutual funds. And it's the investments. That's only a piece of it. And how big a piece of it you make can determine a lot of your journey. And there are a lot of different moving parts. So the confiscation focus that I've learned to have is really just that. It's helping people understand the financial system and where it confiscates their wealth. And that confiscation is just when money unknowingly or unnecessarily leaves your financial world and goes into somebody else's. And that could take a lot of different forms, right? So I've got some examples here on the screen, and we were just talking through probate and legal expenses. That's kind of at the end of the timeline. There are many along the way. And what you're referring to now is shifting to retirement. And specifically, we've got markets that are at all-time highs. So, market losses and market timing is a very real thing that families will have to deal with all across their life at different phases of life when it means different things to them. So, we say we're at all-time highs, we've had a good ride, right? The market has been favorable for the recent future without any really major hiccups. We got to go back to 2008 to find a real downturn. So what that does is that creates a recency bias for people. And I raise that point because I think it's very relevant today for today's retiree that's getting ready to cross the finish line and start retirement, or even if you're in your early years of retirement, a market downturn means something very different to you than what it did to your 45-year-old self or even your 25-year-old self, right? So when you're 25 years old and the market crashes and it's cut in half, that's actually a cause for celebration. Everything is on sale and you can buy things cheap. When you're 45, it's a nuisance, right? You're looking at your account balances and you're used to them going up, and you watched them go down, and maybe that's traumatic, and maybe it changes your approach to money, maybe it doesn't. When you're 65 and now your livelihood depends on the resources that you've set aside throughout your working years, when your livelihood is dependent on the market, it becomes a very different thing. And that's really where the mind shift has to take place, because the math changes too. When you're accumulating wealth, averages matter, right? Because if two people invest differently at different times, but they get the same average rate of return, they will end up at the same destination. Very different for retirees. If two retirees retire with the same amount of money and take the same amount of income from the money, it is no longer the average rate of return that matters to them. It's the sequence that they get those returns that means everything. So market losses is a big factor, and retirement income is always job one of retirement planning, making sure we have a solid, efficient income plan that provides income as long as we're alive. Until we have that, we don't really have a plan. We have hope, and that's a big distinction. So when you talk about the market highs, a downturn would mean very different things to different people depending where they are in their timeline. I'll use an example if you would like.
Yeah, please do. And if you don't mind, that little can you hit that hide button on that screen share down at the bottom? Is that yours or mine? I don't know where that's coming from. There you go.
Yeah, that's
yeah, what you're talking about here is distribution, right? So people tend to think that when they get to retirement, that everything's fine and they can just keep their money where it was. And, the stock market is great when you're accumulating, right? But it's not meant for income, and because there's a lot of risk involved. So, yeah, I think that's what you're going to talk about here. I know you have some calculators on the screen, and just share with us how income works when somebody gets to that point in life.
Yeah, and that really is the transition. That is the critical difference. Is all your life you've been putting money into your portfolio, and you've been accumulating. And I would assume in general you've been watching it go up all of your life. When you hit retirement and you're no longer getting a paycheck every Friday or the 1st and 15th, now where is the money coming from? And for many people, they've never really given thought. They know what their balance is. Everybody understands what their 401k or what their IRA, they know that balance number. But for many, they've never really thought of what does that translate to in income? How much income can I take from this every month or every year, and not have fear that I'll run out of money before I run out of time? That's the retiree's dilemma. And that's the dilemma of the paradigm that we've kind of fallen into as a culture. It used to be you work for the same company for 30 years, you retire on Friday to a pension, you get your gold watch, and you die 2.8 years later. That's very different from today's retirement world. We're dealing in a world where pensions have largely gone away, and they've gone away for the same reasons consumers struggle, right? Employers had the burden of funding their retirees' retirement. And they had to do it. They didn't get a choice, right? You had to fund the pension, and the pension had to work. Today's retiree has no such restriction. There's no requirement that says you must prepare for retirement and design your income correctly, or you're going to face a penalty other than personal destruction. So it's a big challenge for people to make that transition, and then the emotional effect of watching the account go down in value. That's an emotional change that a lot of people aren't ready for. But I'm going to talk about the math of it here as well. And what I'll do to just what I want to show with this complicated calculator. And I look at it all the time, but I have empathy because nobody's looked at this yet. So I'm going to walk through it kind of slowly and just tell a single story. And it is about the market and its relevance in income planning for retirement. So if we've built our retirement accounts around market investments, then that means that those market investments rise and fall with prices. And those prices go in cycles. And sometimes we have a good idea of what drives the cycles. Sometimes we don't. And the more different types of assets we layer in, the more complexity we layer in and the more uncertainty. So this will be a simple illustration, but I'll use the stock market and I'm going to use some round numbers. Let's say we have $1 million nest egg and we're looking at starting retirement at age 65 and we want to fund it through age 90. And we're in the stock market. So I want to first draw your attention to how do you determine what amount of income you can take from the $1 million? And I would say that most people don't give it a structured approach. They simply retire with the $1 million, start retirement, pay bills, and live and hope it all works out. But even for those that are sitting down to plan it, different advisors have different thoughts and different feelings on what you can withdraw. And I don't want to get into too much depth and detail. I just want the lesson of sequence of returns to hit home. In this example, I used $1 million, and I'm over here using a withdrawal of $60,000 as a annual income or an annual withdrawal from the portfolio. And I want to look at how does that turn out. And I'm using the history of the stock market. And I'm going back, I have to grab a 25-year chunk of time to do this. So going back, I'm going to start in 1997. And you can see that my portfolio started at $1 million, and I'm withdrawing $60,000 per year. And what you can see from this is I fund all of my years of retirement, and I have $3.7 million left over. And that's exciting at first glance, but this is the perfect world. And I want to show you how much market timing matters. So if this were your plan and your neighbor looked at it and said, okay, I like that, and wow, I got a chance to look ahead into your results and I like that, so I'm going to follow that plan. So your neighbor takes that same $1 million in the same investment accounts and takes the very same income. The only difference is he starts retirement next year. So he has moved the whole 25-year time period 1 year forward. So he retires in 1998. And instead of getting 3.7 left over, this person only has 1.3 left over. So there's a $2 million swing on that timing. And if I were to look at the very next year, 1999, now I only have $193,000 left over. Again, same starting retirement balance, same investments, same income. Only difference, what order of returns did I get? And the last one I'll show is 2000. So 2000 through 2025 would have given these results. You ran out of money in year 18, and you really missed your full funding by almost $800,000. So the lesson that I really want to hit home here is if you are counting on the market and trying to come up with a reasonable, safe withdrawal from your investments, the differences in outcomes and they're outcomes you don't control, can be substantial. So from 2000, I was 800 negative. 1997, I was 3.7 million positive. And this is only just looking, like I said, at the market. We haven't talked about any of the other confiscations, taxes, fees, any of those things. This is just the sequence of returns. So if you're out there and you're building your wealth this way in market-based accounts, mutual funds, stocks, bonds, and your intent in retirement is to keep your nest egg, but use it to draw income from it each year and leave it in the market, this is the risk that you're facing. Now, the industry approaches this risk a lot of different ways, right? So we come up with different asset allocations, and all of the money firms have their algorithms and their best approaches, and we can take more than that 6%. This is a 6% withdrawal. Just kind of for note. There's a rule of thumb that came about in the 90s called the 4% rule, and that was basically an early study of how much can you safely withdraw from a portfolio over a 30-year retirement without fear of running out. And without getting into the mechanics of the study, computer simulations and using actual returns in all different orders, what was learned that a 4% withdrawal never drew you completely out of money. So that's where 4% came from. And there's been a lot of studies on this. And depending on which camp you listen to, if you listen to the money firms, the Fidelities, the folks that manage money, the money companies, if you listen to them, then we're better than that. 4% is old news. We can do better. If you listen to the academics, the folks who study the actual results and the academics behind it, they will tell you it's gone in the other direction. And the real safe withdrawal is probably somewhere just south of 3%. It's in that 2.8, 2.9 range. So it's a tough paradigm because we've taught people to build their wealth using the stock market. And that's not the way it had been in previous generations. We relied on our savings, and we relied on our insurance, and we relied on benefits and pensions, right? So
three-legged stool, right?
Yeah. So it's a very different world right now, and unfortunately, it's been influenced heavily through marketing, through messaging, through cultural shaping. The money companies have done a good job, and that's where a lot of people have been taught and trained to put their wealth and to try to run retirement that way. So
even in that scenario, and if you go back to the 6%, withdrawal with the best year, the ideal, right? And where did that 6% come from? Well, again, back in the 80s, when you could get 6% on a CD, right? 5-6%. You can't get that these days, right? And like you mentioned, there's lots of other pitfalls. So why don't we just kind of talk a little bit about those pitfalls? Fees, taxes. You kind of touched on the risk. Well, what if the year you retire is not a good year? And that sequence of returns is what you're talking about there. But if you even think about it, $60,000 on $1 million, $60,000 a year, how much is that, right? I mean, that's not a lot, but that's before taxes. And then the 4% rule, that gives you $40,000. So if you got $1 million and you've saved that much, if you think you're going to be able to live on $40,000 today, so yeah, lots of things could go wrong. But if you don't mind, show what a advisor fee, management fee does to that, and maybe the taxes. Can you show that?
Yeah, I'll do the fee first, and I'll walk through this. So if we tend to overcomplicate our world, maybe we enjoy stock picking, or we enjoy building a portfolio and managing it and watching it. those kind of things are generally exciting in your 20s, 30s, stressful in your 40s and 50s, heart-wrenching in your 60s, downright not fun in your 70s or 80s, right? So at some point, somebody's going to determine, I probably should get help. And so help is too good to be true sometimes, but it's not too good to be free. So there's a big push nowadays to use a fee-based advisor, to go the fee route, because they're a fiduciary. And it's a true statement, but you have to be careful because there's always politics behind these things. And there are also conflicts of interest at every level. So I think if you're ever going to pick somebody to work with, you have to pick somebody that you can trust, somebody that you like, somebody that you know has your back, somebody that you would happily refer to friends and family. If they don't meet those criteria, you probably shouldn't be working with them. But this is also assuming the fact that it's gotten complicated to the point where you have to hire somebody. So I'll put a management fee on this account, this $1 million, and I'll start by saying the average is about 1.5%. 1.5% is about the average, but one makes for a nice easy number, and it's a surprising difference. So if I put a 1% fee on this account, you're going to watch this 3.7 million change. And I want you to watch that, because this is what happens when you have a 1% fee. My 3.7 turned into 2.38. It's a meaningful difference. And if you can imagine, you're paying at least 10 grand a year every year of retirement. And so the longer they have that money under management, charging that fee, that's the business model. That's why there's so much pressure and so much pull in that direction, because the sophisticated folks who built the systems have a say, right? So I would always give thought before settling in on a fee-based arrangement for life. But so that's what happens to the best year, which was the 97 start year. It gets much worse for the following years. 98, I'm down to 600. 99, I missed by 300,000. In 2000, I missed by over $1 million. So that's the impact of the fee.
So what happens when somebody runs out of money in that situation? Their account is drained. What does the fiduciary say at that point?
That's a great question, Mary. I love it.
Yeah.
Well, first understand, most times they won't run out of money because people don't live off of a straight spreadsheet like this. What they're watching, if I use the year 2000 start point, I want you to see something here, and I'll put the fee back in. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if you have a 1% fee on this account and you're starting in year 2000 trying to live this way, and again, these are the annual returns that actually happened. So in 2000, and what you see here, remember we said it's the sequence of returns that matters. This retiree that retired in 2000 faced 3 negative years in a row. And at the end of those 3 years, their $1 million was down to $458,000. So you can imagine that people probably tightened their belt, probably stopped spending, probably made a lot of changes. So the interesting thing is financial plans fail emotionally long before they fail mathematically, right? So the retiree is not enjoying life when they're watching their $1 million turn into $450 during a time where they think they're living fairly frugally, $60,000, right? That's a middle class expectation.
Right.
And at $458,000, your prospects of generating $60,000 of income from that pool of money go almost to zero. So,
right.
And the problem, like you said, Barry, earlier, we're at an all-time high right now. There's a recency bias. People have biases in how they make money decisions. And the recency bias is important because it's been so good for the last few years, we tend to forget that it can go the other direction. And so the folks that have retired in the past, 10 years, they've done okay. They've done quite well with the markets. But that doesn't mean that there's not a market turn and they will be impacted. But the folks that are at retirement's doorstep now, with all-time high markets and the prospects, we have so much going on in the world right now. I challenge anybody to tell us where the market's going to be reliably a month from now. We could have a bomb fall here, a storm here, Straits of Gibraltar closed here. There's too many factors beyond our control. And if we don't have that in the back of our minds, or maybe even at the front of our minds, we could set ourselves up for some potential rough outcomes if the market turns. So the idea here is the market has its purpose, but the idea of funding retirement, where you need reliable income just like you used to have when you had a job, and you need that income to last as long as you're alive, and if you have a spouse, as long as your spouse is alive, the cost of failure is pretty high, and the market presents some serious challenges.
Right, that's kind of a good transition. You mentioned Gibraltar, but let's talk a little bit about that next phase. If people, when they get to the 65 and they start to maybe take Social Security, they're on Medicare now, and I know many of you out there, including me, have family members that are sick, have dementia, different things that are affecting them. How can that impact your plan? And how does your income from, let's say, the market affect other things like your Social Security and your Medicare? And then eventually you started out by showing what would be left over, how you transfer that to the next generation. So I know that's a lot there, but kind of covered that transition, if you don't mind, from retirement into, getting old, getting sick, and transferring that money or wealth to the next generation.
Sure. Well, we've kind of talked about the nature of the assets. So if we're using assets that are market-based, this is kind of what we face. And we face that uncertainty, and we're coming at it right now with a recency bias that's fairly confident, and that could change. That could change quickly. We were told that compound interest is the eighth wonder of the world, and use compound growth and start saving early, and over time your money will compound and grow. And that's a powerful lesson, and it's true. But we've applied it by using stuff that goes up and down. And unfortunately, it's just not a compounding scenario. And for that, we get all the risks that we just talked about. And just one thing before I move on, markets will recover, but your timing and your retirement income mistakes won't. And that's an important point that I want people to take from here. The next conversation of confiscation is the tax problem. And I think a lot of people are told at some point in their life, taxes will be lower when you retire. So this 401k or this IRA, this is a great deal because you can pay your taxes in retirement when they're lower. And unfortunately, the folks that are getting closer to retirement or at retirement are learning that just isn't the case at all. And so we hear about all kinds of people talking about things like Roth conversions, and they're doing everything they can to try to undo the problem that was created. And the problem that I see with a lot of retirees and people showing up to retirement today, my generation, is the tax time bomb that they've created, right? So by focusing on the 401k and the IRA to the exclusion of many other opportunities, you get to the point where you're now in retirement. Your mortgage interest deduction is probably not there anymore if you paid your house off. Your kids are now grown and gone, so you don't get those nice write-offs that you used to get. And you're basically without write-offs and deductions and exemptions and all of the other tricks and treats of the tax code. And now all of your income and all of your well-being for the next 30 years is hiding behind a tax wall. And you have to pull out every dollar and face whatever Uncle Sam feels like the government needs at that time as a tax rate. And that's usually determined based on how much money the government needs. Well, the bad news is the government's not doing very well on any front financially. We're in debt higher than I ever imagined we could be. And that money has to come from somewhere. And it generally doesn't come from the poor, and it generally doesn't come from the uber wealthy and the connected class and the corporates. They all figure out ways of paying no taxes. It generally comes from our audience. It's the hardworking middle class, upper middle class folks that are going to carry this. And the problem with taxes is the government gets to change that at their whim. And I like to just give a little history on that, just as a reminder of the realities of it. It doesn't want to stop on that one for me.
Sure. And I'll break in here just real quick because we're getting short on time. After you share this, maybe we'll take some questions and we'll come back with some real strategies and solutions that can work for normal families. But yeah, carry on.
I'll go quickly through this.
There's a break here in a minute.
There's a few I want to hit, but I'll go quick through this. But just as a did you know, guys, did you know that we had a 94% top tax bracket? We did. So that if you need proof that your pre-tax money is not actually yours, this is your proof. The government has had a 94% top tax bracket. They can tax at these levels. It's not to say that we're going to, but I just want that history to be there so you can understand that is reality. If you're in the pre-tax accounts too much, you have to understand you're in partnership with the government and they get to control their percent of the partnership. So
explain a pre-tax account just so they know. What is deferred? What is that?
Yeah, a pre-tax account is where you've earned $1, you haven't paid your income tax on it yet, but you're allowed to put it into an account or an arrangement, and that money will be allowed to grow without taxes. And then the deal is you pay taxes on the way out. So when you spend them in retirement.
So the more your money grows, the more taxes you're going to pay.
The more your money grows, the more your taxes you're going to pay. And then what I'll open up for this one here is it's not just the primary tax. And this is the wake-up call, right? So when people are planning for retirement and when they're thinking through this, they generally, you mentioned a three-legged stool. One of those legs of the stool is Social Security. For most people, it's the biggest leg. It's the one that they know is they can most count on. It represents the biggest share of their retirement. When you get to retirement and you're on your Social Security benefit, your tax return now includes a new calculation. It's called provisional income. And provisional income determines how much of your Social Security will be taxed. And you may say, well, hey, I thought Social Security was supposed to be tax-free. It was. That was the original promise. But through a couple rounds of taxing administrations, we now do tax Social Security. We tax it if you have taxable income of your own. So if you've been a good saver and you have your own taxable income, then they're going to calculate how much of that you have to determine how much of your Social Security they're going to take back in taxes. So that's called provisional income. And I'll run through this as quickly as possible, but just so you can understand, the threshold is what we're trying to figure out is how much provisional income you have. And if your provisional income is above these income thresholds, so for single, 25,000 is where this taxing of Social Security starts. If you're married, it starts at 32,000 of provisional income. And when you cross over the top, over 44,000, 85% of your Social Security can be taxed. But the reason I chuckled is it's this income you might be looking at and say, well, 44,000, okay, but this is not your taxable income. This is your provisional income, and your provisional income is done in this calculation, which starts with half of your Social Security benefit in the calculation, right? So if you're getting a $40,000 Social Security benefit, you got to plug 20 of it into this calculation, which means you only get 12 before they start taxing your Social Security. And we call that a couple things. I refer to it as the 20% penalty no one told you about. Everybody knows about the 10% penalty for taking your IRA money out early, right? That one's been beaten into everybody's head. Here's the 20% penalty that you pay if you leave your money in and you play the game their way. So if you are in that income threshold, here's kind of a quick trip through it. If my Social Security benefit is 48,000, and because of my provisional income, 85% of my Social Security is now taxable, that means $40,000 of my Social Security goes onto my income tax return as taxable income. So if I'm in the 25% tax environment, that is $10,000 that are being lost of your Social Security benefit. And that's 10,000 net dollars, after tax dollars, that you have to give back. So your total benefit's 48, but you have to give back 10. That's about 20% of your benefit. And that $10,000 will happen every year that you have that taxable income. So for some families, this could be a $300,000 problem just because they've exposed their Social Security to taxation. So that's a big one. And I'm sure that one's going to probably bring up the most questions, but I'll show this a different way. When you're in this tax bracket, in this tax torpedo, think of it this way. If I go to my IRA and I withdraw an extra $1,000, when I do that, that causes $850 more of my Social Security to now become taxable. Okay, so I said it's not only about the primary tax. We think of the primary tax. So when I retire and I take my money out, I know I have to pay my income tax. That's the primary tax. Now the secondary tax is we're going to tax this Social Security as well. So now instead of the $1,000 being taxable, it's $1,850 being taxed. So if you're in the 25% bracket, that's going to generate a $462 tax bill. So the real math of that is, even though you're in a 25% bracket, this $462 tax bill on your $1,000 IRA withdrawal means that you're in about a 46% effective tax rate, meaning that's what you'll actually pay. And this is a wake-up call for a lot of people, and it's a monster for folks that are in that lower middle, maybe to mid-level, right? If you're under $100,000 in your retirement lifestyle needs, this is going to be massive impact, and I don't think a lot of people are prepared for it. And so you mentioned one other thing for taxes. When we're talking about estate planning and probate planning, when the first spouse passes away, I don't know if everybody always thinks through this, you don't get to keep both Social Security benefits. So if you're husband and wife, and husband's benefit's 32, wife's benefit is 18, that's a total household income of 5,000 off of Social Security. When a spouse passes away, the surviving spouse keeps the higher of the two benefits, but drops the lower. So in this case, $1,800 a month disappears. That's a 36% reduction in the income coming in. And then the widow penalty is you're no longer filing married joint, which are the most attractive tax rates on the books. Uncle Sam is cruel enough to charge the widow or the widower single tax filer rates, and those are the highest income taxes we have on the books. So you have less income coming in and you're paying more taxes from it. So those are I would say are probably some of the biggest tax surprises for retirees and retirement. But when you talk about, we started this whole conversation by saying, begin with the end in mind, capture your dreams, your wishes. I would also encourage you to understand what your maximum potential is, right? So depending on how much money you make and how much money you have set aside and what your lifestyle is, there is a maximum potential. That's just economics. That's math. We can figure out what is your potential. I think everybody should understand what their potential is. Until you can appreciate that, you can't appreciate the confiscation that really erodes your wealth away. And so you're in this complicated system that takes money from you at every turn. And then your objective is whatever you're left with at the end. The purpose of estate planning is to pass that wealth quickly, efficiently, privately, and accurately to the next generation. That's the challenge of estate.
If I could just interrupt there before we move on to that. I don't know if anybody else, if your blood is boiling now, if you're mad, and if you're noticing, the numbers get more complicated later in life, right? So now you got grandma, who, maybe grandpa passed away, and she's got to file these. She's got to go out and hire a CPA just to do her taxes, right? And it shouldn't be that way, but that's the world we live in. And then when you tie things like long-term care and all the other things that go along with that, it gets even worse. But I do want to just break in, and Logan, I think you said we have some questions. Do you want to share those yourself, Logan, or you'll have to unmute? There you go. You want to share the questions there, Logan, that we might have? Hello. Maybe he's not there. So we will, let me look through the chat there. Maybe he went away. But getting his questions answered.
He was there chatting a minute ago. Here he is. Logan,
yeah. Logan, you there? Hello. Logan, you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
What kind of questions do we have?
Okay. So I just want to kind of reemphasize that 1% fee, that administrative fee, brought it down from, what was it, 3.7 million to, I think it was 2.35. So that's
38.
More than a quarter of your money taken away, and the 1% is conservative.
It is.
And people are worried about commissions, Logan. So so yeah, that's amazing. Did somebody have a question about it specifically, though? I mean, thanks for pointing that out.
Yeah. What would you do to avoid that? I'm sure you have a resolution for that.
What would I do specifically for the fee?
Or around that entirely?
Well, you just have to ask yourself, do you need somebody to manage your money, when you get to that age? Do you want to simplify life? Or do you want to pay accountants and attorneys and advisors and whatnot later on in life? Now, Mark has a lot of initials after his name. I'll just point that out. He's been doing this. He's done a lot of training, a lot of education, and he speaks a little more softly maybe than I do. But Logan, I can tell you're noticing that. My blood is boiling as we're talking about all the taxes and complications. But there are some practical solutions. So yes, let us maybe kind of transition into that just in the essence of time here and talk about that, because we touched on pensions, but pensions, let's face it, unless you're a government employee, you probably don't have a pension. Now, maybe you've worked at some company for 20, 30 years and they still have them, but pensions are broke. And so there's another type of pension that never gets talked about. Maybe we can discuss that a little bit, Mark, and how it all fits into this big plan, how we can optimize our income during retirement, take less risk, hire less advisors, and keep our life a little more simple as we get older, and have when we talk about that distribution, have income we can count on and pay less taxes. What can you share with us about that?
Well, going back to the beginning, it was, we make money decisions and we make them every day, and we tend to make them one at a time. And sometimes we make them with different people at different times in our lives, different markets, different economies. And we hope that all of those decisions that we make line up to something that we can call success, right? And that's in phases, right? We hope our decision making gets us to retirement successfully. But then the next phase of retirement is we got a bunch of new decisions to make on how we spend this wealth down and how we protect it, so that we can get through that phase correctly. And then at the estate planning level, there's a bunch of decisions to be made, because the system will take it from you when you try to transfer it to the next generation as well. So there's different phases of the game, different strategies and techniques for each.
What could go wrong? I mean,
there's a lot to go wrong, and you have to win in all three of those phases to have what you could call a successful financial life. There are lots of people who built up a great big IRA or 401k, but it fell flat on their face in retirement. There are lots of people who were fabulously wealthy and died wealthy, but lost it all on the transfer to the next generation. Famous stories of multi-millionaires that die without a will or without a trust, and they lose it to the system. So what I would say is, retirement is not an investment game. Retirement is an income game. It takes income to get through retirement, and it needs to be stable, reliable, repeatable income. And that's why Social Security is always the foundation of most people's retirement. Well, that type of thing is also available in the private sector. So very similar to, if you hear of somebody who wins the lottery, they usually have a couple options, right? They'll take the lump sum, or they'll take the annuity of payments. And I don't know if you've ever heard or looked into the success record of the folks that took the lump sum, but I would tell you the results are very disappointing for the consumer. The one that takes the payments generally has a better outcome. And the same is true with retirement income and that sort of thing. It's an income situation. So strategies, tactics, it is about coordinating assets. It is about coordinating all the areas of your life that are financial, and making sure that you're being efficient and coordinated across all the areas of your life. There's things that you have to do to protect your wealth. Insurance, it's something that you do to protect your assets, protect your wealth and well-being. There's your government programs. So Social Security, how do you position yourself to get the best benefits? You could do a great job of saving up a lot of money, but if it causes you to cut your Social Security 20%, then you've created a problem that the assets couldn't solve. So I would just say it's always a good place to start by evaluating where you stand today and having somebody who can take you through an analysis of coordination, not just your 401k balance, but do you have a pension? What is your Social Security strategy? What does your insurance look like at this stage of your life? And if you needed it, what would that look like? So it always starts with a careful review. It always starts with a coordinated review. And I would tell you that it's using the best tool for the best job. There's many financial tools out there. They each have their own intended use and purpose. And where I think people suffer the most stress is when they're trying to use the wrong tool for the wrong job, right? So you don't use your tech stock as the vehicle that you're trying to fund your retirement income with. And If you're talking about passing assets to the next generation, that's an insurance function. Assets can't do the job as efficiently, as tax effectively as insurance. So don't try to use your assets as insurance. Assets are best used when they're spent during the life of husband and wife. That's the best use of portfolio assets. Beyond that, you start getting into all kinds of system tax inefficiencies and risks that cause a lot of problems. So your portfolio, your insurance portfolio. I think a lot of people have gotten bad insurance advice out there. And we start young and we don't have a lot of money, so we got to start saving. So we try to build our wealth, and we're supposed to protect our net worth, but the world will tell you to use term insurance to do that. Use the term and invest the difference. And I think that's a mistake for most people. I think we have it switched. I think if people put the financial resources towards permanent insurance early and let that be the growing compounding engine, and used assets and investments later as layering on, they would have better outcomes. And that's been proven time and time again. Because what I find with most people is by the time they're hitting retirement, that's about the time that their insurance is running out. And they find that now their money has to become their insurance. So now it's the money I got to spend in retirement, but it's also the money I'm trying to leave to my spouse and to the money I'm trying to leave to my kids. And that's asking a lot of an investment portfolio. So that would be my
Sure.
2 to 4 cents.
People sometimes forget that, insurance is about risk, right? Reducing risk, whether it be your auto insurance, your homeowner's insurance. And, term insurance is great when you're young, when you're starting to save money. But let's face it, less than 2% of term insurance policies ever pay a claim. And, as we get older, brought up earlier, our clientele's older. It gets harder and harder to get life insurance later in life. So if you get insurance with a AAA mutual insurance company, then you may have some choices later on down the road that you don't normally have with all the term insurance companies you see advertised on TV and the radio and whatnot. So that's important. But and you brought up the sweepstakes or person that hits the jackpot, which I'm down here on the Gulf Coast. We're pretty close to the casinos, and I tell folks all the time, you can just cross the bridge over there if you want to gamble with your money, which is kind of what you're doing when all of your assets are in the market at retirement time. So you might not want to take those risks. But that jackpot pays out. You brought up the word annuity. And again, it's kind of a dirty word like life insurance these days. But these products have been around for hundreds of years, for centuries. There's a reason. And the reason is because they work. So how can an annuity or life insurance actually solve some of those problems we're talking about with, one, just mistakes, second, risk, and then third, the transfer to the next generation. And, maybe you can share a little bit about that, from a faith perspective as well, why that's important.
Oh, I mean, how much to unpack there. First and foremost, the annuity gets a bad word simply because of internet trolls and money companies that are trying to attract fee-based assets. But annuity is nothing more than a stream of payments, right? And there's no reason to give it a bad name. Social Security is an annuity, right? So people fear their Social Security cutting down or running out. That's with the guaranteed money. So imagine the risk you're going to have or the fear you're going to have with your non-guaranteed money. So the annuity is simply a promise. And that promise is that you will have this check every year or every month for the rest of your life. As long as you're alive, you'll get this check. And that's the risk that it takes off the table, because we don't get to know up front, how many years am I going to live? How many years is my spouse going to live? What's the market going to do during that period of time? What spending mistakes will I make? So the annuity takes that risk off of the table by providing income that is guaranteed. And I wouldn't say it should have a dirty name whatsoever. I'm actually very proud of that name because it's a promise. So when you talk about biblical leanings with that, back in the Bible days, in the Old Testament days, you had the Levitical priests. They worked and they were taken care of. But when they retired, there was a covenant that they would be taken care of and paid for the rest of their lives. That was something that was very important, and that's a covenant promise. And the annuity fills that role in a retirement income plan. It is a covenant. It is a promise. And there are a lot of actual biblical references to money. The Bible mentions money more times than it mentions nearly any other subject in the Bible. But we're supposed to be good stewards with the money. We're supposed to leave a legacy. And when we see risk, we're supposed to take steps to prevent that risk. And that's what I see, again, right tool for the right job. So I'm not saying everything should be annuity, everything should be investments. There's a happy blend. It's when you are using the wrong tool. It's when you're asking to do an asset, something it wasn't meant to do. That's where you'll run into problems. And so usually when I encounter somebody, it's somebody that has built too much into the pre-tax, too much market exposure, and unfamiliar with how the system works. And so we begin unwinding those problems. And you asked, what can these things do? Well, the annuity takes the income risk off of the table. The insurance can provide a buffer against the stock market. And that, if you're married to the idea of having a portfolio and doing that for the rest of your life and running the income from your portfolio, having money that is in a properly designed life insurance is the difference between your portfolio surviving a 3-year downturn like I showed earlier. If you have some place that you can go to take money that doesn't tax you and doesn't care what the stock market did, and that can get you through that period of time where the market is down, then your portfolio is allowed to live and fight another day. But if you're only relying on the market and the market is in that 3-year downturn and you have to take income during those 3 years and you have to pay taxes and fees, that's where people run into problems. So there's no one solution. It is coming to terms with what all of the solutions do in their strength and marrying those and coordinating those together. That's why I said coordination is so important, because a lot of times you get the investment guy who doesn't speak insurance language, and you get the insurance guy who doesn't speak investment language. And if there's not a coordination between all of your money folks, there's always going to be room for error. And your chain of retirement is only as strong as its weakest link. So I come back to, it's about using the right tools for the right job.
Absolutely. Well, in our remaining time here, maybe if you don't mind, and you mentioned the Social Security becoming an annuity and exactly what a pension does. A pension becomes
an annuity.
You annuitize. And who makes annuities? Well, it's life insurance companies.
Sure.
And the ones we work with have been around for centuries. So they're pretty good at this. They're pretty good at managing risks. They're pretty good at providing these things. But as a steward and a watchman of people's money, helping them with these very problems that we're talking about, Mark, if you don't mind, just in closing here, maybe share a little bit about, you brought up the legacy, but how can we share the stewardship with our families? The treasure map is how we started. And I know you can write that stuff down, but what else can we do to help ensure that our spouses are taken care of, that our family, our grandchildren, and I know you're already with grandkids. So tell us a little bit, if you don't mind, just in closing, and I'll share. And by the way, if Marc's information, my information will all be in the show notes. You'll be able to preview these videos wherever you saw them, whether it be on YouTube or Facebook. You'll be able to get that stuff in the notes. But if you don't mind, just in closing, Marc, share with us a little bit about that stewardship and that transfer of knowledge and wealth to the next generation.
Well, I think it starts in the home, and it starts with teaching your kids about money, giving them responsibility, helping them when they fall, but don't take care of everything for them. Teach them how something works, show them how to do it, let them do it, and then help them through their mistakes. But make it a part of conversation. I think a lot of times families can be uncomfortable. Money's not a fun topic for everybody, and we tend to not share feelings and thoughts and lessons learned. But I think that's really where it starts. If you're watching this, you know that this stuff isn't taught in school. It's the stuff we all complain about. Why don't they teach this in school? Well, it really is. It's the job of the parents to prepare the children, and that starts in the home. And if you are a parent and that's not your forte, find somebody that you trust and has your back, and bring them into your circle, whether it's an advisor, whether it's a colleague, whether it's your pastor, priest, whatever that role is. Make sure that role is filled, whether it's you filling it or you overseeing it being filled. And communicate as a family. Was that what you were looking for there, Bear?
Yes, let me get back to this. Thank you, Marc, for sharing that. And I want to thank all of you for your time today, for showing up. And if you want help with any of this stuff, we want to be a resource for you. And you can contact Marc through his website and contact me through my website. You can be able to preview or rewatch this video, share it with your family, with your friends, but have those conversations. We have the 4th of July coming up. We live in a great country, and we have freedom now, but things can change. And I think that's what Marc was trying to get across. Tax laws can change. We've seen that already. Inflation can change. Health can change. And you want to take care of these things sooner or later. We can provide resources, possibly attorneys, accountants, if you need that help. But much of this stuff you can do on your own. So again, I want to thank you, Marc, for joining us, and thank all of you for being with us today. And if we can help you any further, just reach out to us and let us know how we can help. So have a great day. Thank you for your time. We'll talk to you later.